Is there a risk, though, that they may be overplaying their hand? And I ask this because clearly their one and biggest leverage point was control over the Strait of Hormuz. Vice President Vance said sort of the quiet part out loud when he said the U.S. signed this MOU in part to let the world refill some of their fuel stocks. We've seen now oil prices even lower than they were before the war. Gulf producers are pumping again. Is time now not on Iran's side?
Well, I think to your point, they will absolutely overplay their hand. Right now, I think that Iranian officials are experiencing what I call a sugar high. They are very confident given that they were able to survive. That was their only priority, which was to survive. They feel that they've done that and then some. They're likely not going to easily relinquish their control over the Strait of Hormuz. And I'm also skeptical that they're going to offer meaningful compromises on the nuclear file. But as I said earlier, this is a regime which is good at resistance, it's good at repression, it's terrible at governance. And for that reason, few countries in the world have experienced more popular uprisings over the last 2 decades than Iran. So I expect that whatever happens, whenever the dust settles, it's going to be a regime which remains deeply unpopular at home.
Interesting. Kareem, if we could just end where we began, and that is some insights that we can glean from this funeral. More than 100 countries sent representatives. Pakistan sent its prime minister and its army chief, but Iran's two great patrons sent stand-ins. Putin sent Medvedev, Xi Jinping sent a parliamentary vice chair. As for Gulf neighbors, Saudi sent a deputy minister. Qatar was led by a parliament speaker. UAE, Kuwait, Bahrain, they didn't send anyone. What does that guest list tell us about where Iran stands in the world and in the region right now?
It's a great question, Bianna, and the reality is this is one of the most isolated, friendless regimes on earth. Most of its neighbors fear it. It's the countries who are from their vantage point, their strategic allies, countries like China and Russia are fair weather friends. Even if the country were to open up to be removed from sanctions, very few countries want to invest in Iran. And so Henry Kissinger put this many years ago, that Iran has to decide whether it's a nation or a revolutionary cause. I think this regime has continued to decide to be a revolutionary cause. And for that reason, I think it's going to remain a largely isolated nation internationally and a largely unpopular regime at home.
This is as close as we're going to get to the casket of Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, as well as several of his family members who were killed in that joint U.S.-Israeli airstrike on February 28th. As you can see, as we stand here, the atmosphere is extremely charged up. Many of the people here, and it's a big crowd, are screaming death to America, and they're vowing revenge, both against the United States as well as President Donald Trump, and of course, against Israel as well.
I thought what's notable, Bianna, is we still haven't seen the successor to Ayatollah Khamenei, his 56-year-old son, Mojtaba Khamenei. It was thought that perhaps he would make an appearance, but it raises even more questions about the state of his physical and mental health.
Right. He skipped his father's funeral. He skipped his wife's memorial. He hasn't shown his face. We haven't heard his actual voice in 4 months. You spent years studying his father and the power that he wielded. Can a supreme leader that nobody sees actually rule a country of 91 million, especially today?
You know, that's doubtful, Bianna, because Ayatollah Khamenei, he'd ruled for 37 years. By the time of his killing, he was the longest serving autocrat in the world. And that process of him becoming powerful, it was a power which had been accumulated over many decades. His son inherits a system which is, obviously deeply unpopular. And it's a regime which has gradually transformed from a clerical dictatorship, one ruled by the clergy, to a military dictatorship, one ruled by the Revolutionary Guard. So it's not clear whether Mojtaba Khamenei in the coming months or years is going to be Iran's most powerful figure. I expect that the person who will emerge as Iran's next strongman is not likely to be a cleric wearing a turban. It's more likely to be someone with a military background.
And is that one person, or is this a group of leaders? Because I guess this leads to the question of whether a one-man rule over Iran is officially over, or was this the direction that the country was headed in even before the war?
You know, in Iran over the last century, the country has effectively been ruled by four strongmen. In the early part of the 20th century, you had Reza Shah. He was succeeded by his son, Mohammad Reza Shah. Then you had the 1979 revolution led by Ayatollah Khamenei, and then Ayatollah Khamenei. So there's few countries of that size like Iran that have been ruled by so few people. So certainly at the moment, there appears to be a power vacuum. People are still jockeying for power. But I think what's likely to happen, and this process could take years, that we will see the return of a strongman, perhaps similar to what we've seen in post-Soviet Russia.
And what these leaders will have to govern in a society dealing with inflation that's raging, economy desperate on hard currency. We talk about the unemployment rate in that country. Washington has offered to unfreeze billions in Iranian funds if Iran drops its demands to charge tolls on the Strait of Hormuz. It's hoping to collect some $40 billion a year in fees. The United States is saying you drop that ask and you'll get billions more in unfrozen assets that are yours, and perhaps even eventually you'll be able to maintain economic relations with more of the outside world. We're 30 days into the 60-day MOU. Iran has yet to agree to that. Why?
So what the Trump administration has sought to do, Bian, is to present two very distinct paths to Iran. The first path is one of global economic integration. Iran would be reintegrated into the global economy and political system. They've talked about hundreds of billions of dollars in assets being invested in Iran. Iran would be sanctions-free. At the same time, they presented an alternative path, which is if you want to continue to prioritize revolutionary ideology, death to America, death to Israel, that's only going to bring you continued sanctions and hardship and isolation. And the reality is that for a revolutionary regime like Iran, the economic well-being of its population has never been its priority. Its top priority is always its own survival. And I think this regime is likely going to double down on revolutionary ideology because they believe that if they were to open up to the outside world, to open up to the forces of international capitalism and civil society, that would likely loosen their grip on power rather than entrench them.